before movies sucked. Before Michael Keaton was chosen for the Cape, he was known mainly for comedy, but he didn't want to be stuck in his career and deliberately chose roles that kept audiences and the industry guessing. Kind of ironic, then, that Batman made him an international star while sidelining his acting career for the better part of a decade. But before that, before Beetlejuice, when he was still considered an up-and-coming comedic lead, he was cast in one of the few parodies of gangster movies to stand the test of time, Johnny Dangerously. Released in 1984 and directed by Amy Heckerling. Wait, what? A female director? Directing a comedy? That's right, Amy Heckerling is responsible for some of the most iconic comedy movies from the 80s and 90s, and if you've never heard of this cinematic legend, I urge you to look up these titles and schedule the time. The 80s were an interesting time for movies. Studios were still mostly autonomous. Hollywood still led the world in creating global entertainment, which meant there was room for experimentation. In that spirit, this charming little movie was granted a budget to see if there was an audience for more. While it didn't earn a sequel, it has grown into something of a cult classic, standing alongside other parody greats that held a similar irreverent style. Michael Keaton plays Johnny Dangerously, a gangster with a heart of gold, drawing heavy inspiration from the James Cagney movies of the 30s. He's joined by a solid cast of legends and rising stars, each embracing their role with an authenticity that supports the overall tone rather than overplays the character or beats the punchline to death. The main story sees Johnny reminiscing about his life of crime, growing up in a rough neighborhood and wanting to help his family, even if that means helping local gangsters in a turf war. Turns out, he's pretty good at being a gangster and becomes the right-hand man to Peter Boyle's gang boss, Jocko Dundee. Side note, the decade-long turf war sees Jocko Dundee versus a ruthless, foul-mouthed wolf in a tuxedo, the notorious gangster Roman Troy Maroney. It cannot be overstated how perfectly brilliant Richard Dimitri encapsulates and satirizes the self-made man, immigrating to the U.S. to make his fortune as a nightclub owner and a local crime boss. Well-dressed with the air of a sophisticate, his deliberately indistinct accent and confident abusive pronunciation emphasize that wherever he's from, he wasn't born in New York. Marilu Henner delivers a smoldering and savvy femme fatale, the beautiful nightclub singer fresh in town, Lil Sheridan. Understandably attracted to this new face in the nightclub, Johnny quickly learns she's not your average giggling showgirl. But while he's making these discoveries, Johnny's tug-of-war between mob life and going straight for good gets even further complicated by his idealistic younger brother, shielded from Johnny's gangster life and on a quest for justice, now that he's become the new assistant district attorney. How Johnny navigates the gang war, internal rivalries, sibling rivalries, a budding romance, and paying for his mother's constant medical emergencies, well, that's a story that serves as yet another fine example of how a dark and dramatic plot with a few tweaks and quirks can become an entertaining, lighthearted comedic parody. I think one reason that this movie didn't perform so well at the box office was partly due to this adherence to authenticity and form. Movies from the 30s had a certain style that came from technological requirements related to a new and growing industry, and a performance style that blended the broad gestures of acting live on stage with a growing understanding of a more nuanced performance allowed by the camera. What I'm saying is, a gangster movie from James Cagney in the 30s is a different experience from the gangster movies of the Godfather, Scarface mold that were already redefining the genre for decades to come. But even if you've never seen one of these Cagney gangster movies from the 30s, there's enough sight gags and silliness to keep things going for even the most casual viewing. One of the strengths of this style of parody is the presentation. We're not just focused on Johnny, but the world he lives in. Things are happening in every frame of every scene. There's no wasted time or pointless jokes hacked together from some exhausted editor after sorting through days of dailies from improvisation on the set. The beats come from a love of the original material, with a playful bit of silliness that lets fans of the source material know there's no meanness or malice intended, just a good spin on a classic genre. All in all, Michael Keaton has had a long and legendary career. While his start was mainly in light, topical comedies that weren't too expensive, it deserves to be noted that his most enduring characters are those that are not topical or set in a contemporary environment. Rather, his most enduring work seems to be as a superhero or as a chaotic ghost. I would say his Gangster with a Heart of Gold, Johnny Dangerously, deserves its place on the podium as one of Michael Keaton's standout roles,